I watched the thick green sludge of my daughter-in-law's detox smoothie seep into the freshly printed pages of my final economics thesis. And when she offered a sickly sweet, entirely empty apology, I calmly walked over to the kitchen sink and submerged her $3,000 camera lens into the soapy dishwater. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Before we dive deeper into this absolute nightmare of a family drama, let me know in the comments down below, what city or country are you listening from today? I love seeing where you all are tuning in from. Now, let's get back to the story. The camera lens incident did not happen in a vacuum. By the time the heavy glass cylinder hit the bottom of the sink with a dull thud, sending a wave of bubbles over the edge, I already understood exactly the game Chloe was playing. My son lost his absolute mind, his face turning a shade of purple I had not seen since he was a toddler, holding his breath to get a toy. I simply looked at him and told him his wife had made an incredibly poor investment of her social capital. My name is Eleanor. I am a widow, and to the absolute horror of my son and his wife, I am a full-time university student majoring in economics. This is the story of how I stopped functioning as a free subsidiary for my son's failing marriage that fateful Thursday. I was sitting at the large oak dining table in my own apartment, frantically reviewing the final printed copy of my capstone project. It was a comprehensive analysis of microeconomic behavior in parasitic local markets. I had spent 4 months pouring my soul into those 80 pages. Chloe, my son's wife, fancied herself a lifestyle influencer. She contributed nothing to the household economy, yet treated my spacious city apartment as her personal, free-of-charge production studio. That morning, she strutted into the dining room wearing a matching designer athleisure set, balancing her massive stainless steel tumbler of green sludge in one hand and her phone in the other. She was visibly annoyed that my papers were occupying the table she usually used to film her morning routine. There was an entire living room, a kitchen island, and a balcony available to her, but she deliberately squeezed right past the edge of my chair. I saw her hip bump the table. I saw her wrist tilt. The thick spinach and spirulina nightmare splashed violently across my title page, soaking through the first 30 sheets in seconds. She did not gasp. She did not scramble for a towel. She simply looked down at the ruined culmination of my semester, gave a little shrug, and dropped a dry, unapologetic oops before turning to walk away. Dead silence fell over the dining room. I did not cry. I did not scream. I looked at the green liquid destroying my hard work. And then I looked at the kitchen counter where Chloe had just finished cleaning her prized, custom-ordered macro photography lens. I stood up, my joints perfectly steady. I walked past her, picked up the heavy metal cylinder, turned to the sink full of soapy water left over from my breakfast dishes, and dropped it straight in. The water splashed up, and the sink swallowed the equipment whole. Chloe let out a shriek so loud and piercing it vibrated against the windows. Julian sprinted out of the guest bedroom, demanding to know what I had done. I looked him dead in the eye, perfectly composed. "You can send me the invoice, Julian," I said, keeping my voice completely level. "But first, you need to calculate the depreciation of your wife's respect for the person funding her entire existence." If Chloe wanted to call the authorities over a piece of glass, I was fully prepared to report the intentional destruction of my academic property and the systemic harassment occurring inside my own home. Julian and Chloe had moved in with me a year prior, leveraging the classic excuse of saving money to buy a house. In economic terms, they had established a monopoly over my resources. At first, they stayed in their designated room. But gradually, Chloe's influence spread like inflation. Her ring lights blocked the hallways. Her PR packages buried the entryway. Her constant need for absolute silence while she filmed meant I was banished to my bedroom for hours. I was a guest in the home my late husband and I had purchased. The morning after the smoothie incident, the atmosphere in the apartment was toxic. Julian stomped into the kitchen, scowling, demanding a formal apology and an immediate bank transfer to replace the lens. I poured myself a cup of Earl Grey tea, sat down at the island, and took a slow sip. "There will be no transfer, and there will be no apology," I said smoothly. "Her emotional outbursts are a liability I am no longer willing to underwrite." He scoffed, whining that Chloe was locked in their room crying, that she could not film her content, and that I was destroying her career. Rather than engage in a circular debate with an adult man defending a parasite, I finished my tea, washed my cup, and walked to the hallway closet. I found 3 large, heavy-duty cardboard boxes. Moving methodically, I walked into my private bathroom, the one Chloe had slowly infiltrated with her imported exfoliants, organic serums, and styling wands. I packed up every single bottle, tube, and jar. I carried the boxes out to the hall and stacked them directly in front of their bedroom door. Then I called the building manager and requested an immediate lock change for my bedroom and private bathroom doors. By that afternoon, I had sole secured access to my personal space. When Chloe tried to casually walk into my bathroom that evening for her skin routine, she hit a locked door and nearly tripped over her own boxes. I could hear her complaining bitterly to Julian, her voice nasal and grating. I simply put on my noise-canceling headphones, opened my textbook on fiscal policy, and went about my studying. On Tuesday morning, Chloe came into the kitchen expecting breakfast. For 12 months, I had been the sole provider of groceries, utilizing the budget I had carefully structured from my husband's life insurance and my own savings. She dropped onto a stool and sighed. "Julian has a big presentation today. Are you making those avocado toasts?" "I have no idea, Chloe," I replied, highlighting a paragraph in my book. "I suppose it depends on what ingredients you purchased and what time you intend to start cooking." She opened the main double-door refrigerator and stared at the empty shelves. The night before, I had purchased a small, efficient mini-fridge for my locked bedroom and transferred all my fresh produce and proteins into it. "Where is the food?" she demanded, her voice rising in panic. "Julian needs to eat before work." "Julian is perfectly capable of engaging in a free market transaction at the local grocery store," I answered, without looking up from my text. I am an economics student, Chloe, not a subsidized cafeteria. As of this exact moment, you two are responsible for your own consumption." She opened her mouth to scream, but the absolute lack of emotion on my face stopped her. I was not angry. I was simply closing a bad account. That afternoon, I sat in the university library, feeling the quiet hum of academic pursuit around me. It was a stark contrast to the chaotic circus my home had become. While I was reviewing my reprinted thesis, my sister-in-law Martha called. Julian had inevitably complained to her, seeking a bailout. "Eleanor, you are being ridiculous," Martha scolded through the phone. "You ruined her expensive equipment. Just pay her back and make them dinner. You know Julian gets anxious when his routine is disrupted. Besides, I need to borrow some money for a new roof, and since you clearly have cash to throw away on college tuition at your age—" I stopped her right there. "Martha, the central bank of this family is officially insolvent," I said quietly but firmly. I hung up the phone. It was time to audit the secondary accounts. Years ago, I had opened a joint checking account with Julian, strictly designed as an emergency medical fund. It was funded entirely by my savings. I walked straight from the library to the bank branch on campus. I sat down with a teller and requested a full printout of the ledger for the past 6 months. As I reviewed the transactions, the pattern was glaringly obvious. Artisanal coffee shops, high-end cosmetic boutiques, online clothing retailers. Julian's so-called medical emergencies were entirely composed of Chloe's lifestyle expenses. The total deficit was staggering. I looked at the teller, authorized the complete withdrawal of the remaining balance, transferred it to a new, entirely private account, and permanently closed the joint ledger. I walked out of the bank feeling a massive weight lift off my shoulders. At 2 p.m. on Wednesday, my phone vibrated. It was Julian. He was whispering frantically, his voice shaking with humiliation. "Mom, I am at a business lunch with a client. My card just declined. The waiter said the account does not exist. You are embarrassing me in front of my boss. I am not responsible for your cash flow issues, Julian," I replied, walking across the sunny campus quad. Those funds were an emergency safety net, not a slush fund for designer lattes. You will have to liquidate some of your own assets to pay the bill. "I cannot," he hissed. "My personal cards are completely maxed out because of the camera lens we had to order." "Then I suggest you offer to mop the restaurant floors to work off your debt." "Have a productive afternoon," I said, and ended the call. Chloe despised losing her leverage. To her, my newly enforced boundaries were not a logical restructuring. They were a direct challenge to her dominance. On Friday evening, without a single word of notice, she invited a group of her influencer friends over for a collaborative content shoot. I arrived home from an exhausting evening lecture to find my living room completely rearranged. Furniture was shoved against the walls. Bright LED panels were blindingly illuminating the space, and Chloe was standing on my expensive Persian rug in stilettos, holding a glass of my vintage wine. I walked over to the main power strip that controlled her lighting equipment and simply clicked the switch with my foot. The room plunged into dim, natural shadows. "Good evening," I said, offering a tight, meticulously polite smile. Eleanor, we are in the middle of a brand deal, Chloe snapped, her face flushing red in front of her peers. I am thrilled for your entrepreneurial spirit, I replied, calmly taking the glass of wine from her hand. But this is my property, and it is time for my evening study session. You are welcome to relocate your production to the sidewalk outside the building. I sat down on my sofa, opened my laptop, and began typing. Chloe's friends looked terrified. They awkwardly packed up their tripods, muttered forced apologies, and practically ran out the front door. Chloe stood in the center of the room, vibrating with rage. She glared at me, her fists clenched. But without her audience, she had no power. She turned and stomped down the hallway. I simply adjusted my glasses and continued typing. The following Monday, I addressed the utility consumption. I contacted the internet service provider and downgraded the plan to a basic tier, sufficient for my academic research, but entirely inadequate for uploading massive, high-definition video files. I also changed the router password. When Chloe discovered she could no longer upload her vlogs, the powder keg finally exploded. It was a Tuesday night. I was in the kitchen preparing a simple salad. Julian and Chloe came storming into the room. I cannot live like this, Chloe shrieked, her face distorted with fury. You are starving us, you stole our money, and now you are sabotaging my career. You are a bitter old woman who is jealous of my youth. Julian stood behind her, nodding weakly. Mom, you have to turn the internet back on. She is losing sponsors. I placed my fork down on the counter. I am not sabotaging anything, I said, my voice steady and cold. I am simply no longer subsidizing your delusions. You are both adults. You want high-speed internet? Purchase your own router. You want gourmet food? Buy it. You want a studio? Rent one. My home is no longer a charity. Chloe stared at me, realizing for the first time that my well of resources was permanently dry. The fake smiles, the passive-aggressive comments, the entitlement. It all crumbled when it was no longer financially supported. I am leaving, she screamed. I am not staying in this toxic environment for one more second. I heard the frantic sound of zippers and wheels. Within 20 minutes, she was dragging 2 massive suitcases toward the front door. She looked back at Julian, expecting him to follow her, to beg, to offer some grand romantic gesture of financial ruin. But Julian just stood there, completely paralyzed by the reality of his maxed-out credit cards and empty bank accounts. She sneered at him in disgust, opened the door, and walked out. She did not even look at me. Once the free housing, free meals, and free money evaporated, her profound love for my son vanished into thin air. Julian was left standing in the hallway, looking completely lost. He tried to play the victim the very next day. He cleaned the kitchen without being asked. He spoke to me in a soft, apologetic tone. He sat down next to me on the sofa while I was reading. "Mom, I am so sorry," he mumbled, staring at his hands. "Chloe manipulated me. I did not see what she was doing. I know I messed up, but things will be different now. It is just you and me again." I closed my book and looked at him. "I accept your apology, Julian," I said gently. He exhaled a massive breath of relief, clearly believing the crisis was averted and the Bank of Mom was reopening. "Thank you, Mom. I promise I will be better." I held up my hand to stop him. However, acknowledging a bad investment does not magically erase the debt. You have exactly 60 days to secure a lease and relocate. He looked at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language. "You are throwing me out? But Chloe is gone." "The problem was never exclusively Chloe," I explained, maintaining direct eye contact. "The problem is your fundamental belief that I am your permanent safety net. You allowed a woman to disrespect me in my own home because it was convenient for you. You are nearly 30 years old. It is time to enter the real economy. I love you, but my tenure as your manager is over." There was no screaming. There was no dramatic argument. Julian looked into my eyes and realized the negotiation was closed. 2 months later, he packed the last of his belongings into a rented van. He handed me the spare keys, his shoulders slumped, and walked out the door. That evening, I sat alone in my living room. I brewed a cup of premium herbal tea, opened the balcony doors to let the cool city breeze flow in, and looked at my graded economics thesis on the coffee table. The apartment was enveloped in a deep, profound, and beautiful silence. I took a sip of my tea and smiled. My home and my life were finally my own again. Sometimes family loyalty is mistakenly equated with endless sacrifice, but allowing yourself to be consumed by entitled people is not love. It is simply bad economics. Boundaries do not ruin a family. They expose exactly who was only there for the benefits. Wow, what a story! Do you think Eleanor went too far with the camera lens, or did Chloe get exactly what she deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and please don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more daily stories like this one.